Let's start this on Mustafar, right after Obi-Wan defeated Anakin. This was the tipping point for Kenobi. He's lost everything in his life that he's ever cared about. His master, Satine, the Jedi Order, and now his brother Anakin. He's been strong up until this point, but he can't take it anymore. He's lost the most out of everyone, and now has nothing left. He was forced to dismember and kill his own apprentice, someone he loved deeply, and this act broke him. He can't hold back his emotions, and lets them all flood into him. The anger, pain, guilt, it takes over Obi-Wan's mind, as he experiences the dark side for the first time. And now, only one thing floods his mind: revenge. He doesn't just desire revenge for Anakin, but needs it against the person who forced him to kill Anakin. He picks up Padme, and joins back up with Yoda and Organa to tell them he was successful in defeating Anakin. He was disappointed that Yoda failed in his duel with Palpatine, and tells the Grand Master, now that they are together, they can defeat him. Yoda tells Obi-Wan that the opportunity has passed, that he's too weak to confront him now. But Obi-Wan tells the Master he will go regardless of whether Yoda joins him, and goes to walk off. Yoda can tell something has changed within Obi-Wan, but can sense his resolve, and knows he isn't lying about this. Yoda reluctantly joins Obi-Wan, knowing he isn't at full strength, but they head back towards Palpatine's office. They sneak their way in, past the clone troopers in the streets, and the Senate guards to once again stand off with the Emperor. Palpatine was surprised that Yoda would face him again, and knew this was a desperate attempt, and he wasn't at full capacity. But no matter, it gave him another opportunity to finish them off once and for all. The Jedi engaged the Sith Lord, and they clashed their lightsabers with murderous intent. Obi-Wan's defense was sharp, and there was no way Palpatine could penetrate it. Yoda mixed in some attacking moves, some assaulting around and looking for openings. Yoda, although fatigued, did find one as he cuts across Palpatine's leg as Obi-Wan distracted the Sith Lord from behind, and capitalizes on Yoda's attack by following up and slashing across Palpatine's right arm. Yoda kicks him back, and the Sith Lord stumbles away, injured but not defeated. The Jedi can see their opportunity is now, and double their efforts. Yoda goes for an ambitious move, jumping over Palpatine to jab his lightsaber at his body. But Palpatine pulls out a second blade out of his sleeve, and ignites it through the Grand Master's chest as Yoda flops to the floor, defeated. Although his death was not in vain, because right before Palpatine ignited his lightsaber, Yoda managed to connect his own with Palpatine and put a hole in his abdomen. He was severely weakened, and now Obi-Wan pressed forward. He looked at the Grand Master, dead. Another death in his life, and the dark side began to creep up inside of him. He was on the attack, whilst Palpatine defended, who could sense the dark side growing in Obi-Wan. But he was too injured, and couldn't keep up with the fresh and youthful Kenobi, who opened himself up to the dark side, and struck down Palpatine in anger, enacting his revenge on the Emperor. Obi-Wan stands over Palpatine's body, and realizes the opportunity that he has. The Emperor is dead, which leaves a power vacuum, and he could be the one to fill it. If he did, he could ensure the Empire does actual good for the galaxy, and not just take advantage of people for personal gain. He looks to the entrance of the office, and Master Amida walks in after hearing the clashing of lightsabers stop. He assumed Palpatine won, but shuddered in shock as he saw Obi-Wan standing over him. Obi-Wan points his blade towards Amida, and tells him to swear loyalty to him, that he will take over from Palpatine and lead the Empire. He tells him, if he does, Amida will have all the power he's ever dreamed of, and if he doesn't, he will die. Amida declares his loyalty, and now Obi-Wan has control over the bureaucracy of the Senate, which is key to ruling the Empire and galaxy. At the next Senate meeting, Obi-Wan declares himself as Emperor after defeating Palpatine. There was some initial resistance from some senators, including ones he knew quite well, Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, and Padme, but Kenobi had control over the bureaucrats and clone army, so there was nothing anyone could really do. He begins making changes in the galaxy. He makes a deal with Kamino to continue the production of the clones, who will become the galactic police around the galaxy, and repurposes the current clones into this position. He begins a war on crime, and uses the clone army to do this successfully, wiping out the major crime syndicates and ending the trade of spice in the galaxy. Obi-Wan made gambling illegal, as he'd personally seen what it had done to many people's lives, and bans most recreational drugs that has no benefit to health. It's important to note that Obi-Wan hasn't completely turned to the dark side, but draws upon it sometimes when it's necessary. What's changed most is his mindset. All the death and loss in his life made him realize if he really wanted to implement his view of how the galaxy should run, he would have to take power and do it his own way. Obi-Wan genuinely does want what's best for the galaxy, but does this in a totalitarian way. He works with economists to create his own economic policy, making sure the rich can't avoid paying taxes, and ensures the poor pay as little as possible. He uses this money to ensure that every individual in the Empire has basic human rights with enough food and water and shelter to survive. Anyone who tries to dodge his economic policies and try to get off freely will be visited by himself or the Imperial Police. Obi-Wan Kenobi invites surviving Jedi around the galaxy to join him and start a Dark Jedi Order. They aren't Sith and don't fully practice the dark side, but take advantage of some of the techniques that it offers to increase their power and use the emotions that Jedi didn't, including anger, hatred, and fear, to do this. He would easily convince the surviving Jedi that the ways of the Jedi are primitive, outdated, and ultimately led to the Clone War. But now if they adopt his new philosophy of the Force, they can achieve more power and then use this for the good of the galaxy. Break free from the limitations that the Jedi placed on themselves. Many Jedi decide to join him, but there are also many that don't, who know they don't have the numbers or strength to oppose Obi-Wan's empire, and decide to live out their peaceful days somewhere in the galaxy. Obi-Wan wouldn't hunt them, and deep down envied the peace they would all find in their solitude. Master Mita presented Obi-Wan with the Death Star project from Palpatine's files, but he dismissed it. It was too crude a means of control, and he was certain the clone army would be enough. For the next 2 years, Obi-Wan continues setting up his empire. Crime has reduced around the galaxy, the people are generally happier, and he's helped the galaxy prosper after the devastating Clone War. There was still a lot of backlash from the Senate, who now only exist to carry out his orders, but no one can argue with how the state of the galaxy has improved. Since Obi-Wan was in control of the clone police, there was no chance of opposition. The clones as police have proved effective and are situated on every planet under their control. The main reason the galaxy has prospered under Obi-Wan's rule is because corruption was stomped out of the Senate. The senators were no longer involved in the decision making, so couldn't make and implement changes that were for personal financial gain. Trade and resources were distributed equitably so that more primitive and poorer worlds could have an opportunity to trade and do business with the breadth of worlds in the galaxy without being taken advantage of. Obi-Wan thought about all the people he's lost often and wondered whether they'd be proud of him. He didn't know if they would approve of his methods, but the results speak for themselves. He wanted what's best for the galaxy, and with his level of power and influence, the galaxy is doing better than it had in a long time. Padme met with Obi-Wan often, trying to convince him to relinquish the dictatorship and return the galaxy to democracy, and that with Palpatine's death, the galaxy would flourish no matter what. Obi-Wan considered doing what Padme said, but in the end decided against it, which forced Padme out of the Senate. Obi-Wan didn't know where she went with the twins, Luke and Leia, but guessed Naboo, and he did dearly miss her. Obi-Wan thought at the end of the war, there would be no threats to him as Emperor, but he was mistaken. The Empire didn't expand to the unknown regions, so didn't know what was brewing by the strongest species of the region, the Chiss. The Chiss have been observing the galaxy for a while now, the Republic, the Separatists, and now this Empire. Thrawn meets with the leader of the Chiss, the 9 Aristocrat leaders, where they discuss the state of the galaxy now, and Thrawn tells them that there might be an opportunity. He explains how he analysed the Clone War conflict immensely, and quickly deduced that there was a shadow figure, a person who started the Clone War and was playing both sides from the beginning. He did not know who this was, but assumed they were doing so they could use the conflict the war created to take power over the galaxy for themselves, and elect themselves as Emperor. When Thrawn looks at Emperor Obi-Wan, he doesn't think this man is capable of this. He doesn't have the tenacity and ambition to do this, and concludes that the shadow figure who orchestrated the war was killed by Obi-Wan, who took his place. However, Thrawn doesn't think that Obi-Wan is a strong opponent or leader. Yes, he has a large force under his command, but Thrawn believes that if the Chiss went to war with his empire, they would win. The Chiss are very self-righteous people, and believe themselves to be better than everyone else. They are a very high class and functioning society, and want to share it with the rest of the galaxy. They prepare their forces for war, and start planning the assault on Obi-Wan's empire. Their first attack was on the planet Kamino. Thrawn deduced that the best way to weaken Obi-Wan's forces was to cut off his supply chain and not allow him to expand his fleet. Although it was heavily fortified, Kamino was successfully destroyed, with all the clone facilities now not operational. Obi-Wan was informed of Kamino's destruction, and watched the recording that Thrawn sent him, detailing the Chiss declaring war on his empire. Obi-Wan panicked when he saw this. He needed Kamino to continue supplying his forces. However, his army was still large enough to be able to take the ascendancy on. He was fearful that all the change he'd been able to implement would be undone, but he begins organizing his counterattack. War once again takes hold of the Star Wars galaxy, as the Empire clashes with the Chiss ascendancy. The war erupted with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of the galaxy. Obi-Wan was determined to preserve the galaxy he had forged, and commanded his forces around the galaxy. The Chiss, under the control of Thrawn, outsmarted Obi-Wan on many occasions, and the Emperor knew he wasn't dealing with an ordinary opponent. He sent his darkside warriors into war, who engaged the Chiss soldiers in lightsaber duels and proved effective, and often turned the tide of some battles, and Obi-Wan saw the potential of victory. After the Chiss took over Kamino, they had their top scientists study the clones. They got their hands on the original copy of the Jango Fett genome and started creating bioweapons that they engineered to only attack individuals with the same DNA, meaning the clone army. They instilled their Chiss technology into this, not known to the wider galaxy. The bioweapon would cause the clones to slow down and eventually lose consciousness, although not dead, but they could no longer fight. The release of these weapons is what turned the tide of the war. Obi-Wan started losing battle after battle, after Thrawn and his forces were making it closer and closer towards the capital. Obi-Wan was panicked by this, and got the top Coruscant scientists to work on an antidote to the Chiss's bioweapon, but without a sample, they couldn't do this. The Chiss eventually reached Coruscant and engaged the last of Obi-Wan's forces, who realizes there is no hope for his army. He doesn't even address the Senate, and boards his personal cruiser to leave his post and abandon his army. Thrawn successfully captures Coruscant, and the Aristocrat leaders come in and address the Senate, detailing how the Chiss will now take over the Empire from Obi-Wan Kenobi, rule the galaxy, and impart their own ideas onto the people. With the clone army defeated, there is no possible hope of resistance. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan managed to escape Coruscant and set his destination for Naboo. He lands down on the countryside next to a forest and spends his days sleeping in his ship, thinking about how his defeat came so easily. He thinks about what to do next and decides he'll stay here on Naboo, and begins cutting down trees and assembling a wooden hut for him to live in. There was a village 30 meters away, and he trades some wood for some cattle and begins a farm of his own. He spends a lot of his time reminiscing about the past and the loved ones he lost, but ultimately he lives out his days in peace, a broken man who had lost everything. Sadly, his fate was similar to that of the original timeline. He was a lonely, sad man, burdened with the loss of everything he cared about. Obi-Wan let this consume his soul, and he could hardly focus on anything else. One day, he ventured into the village nearby, with some meat to sell, when he stops in place, in the middle of the street, opposite a young woman with 2 5-year-old children walking towards him, and Obi-Wan mutters Padme's name. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out What If Anakin Skywalker Never Turned to the Dark Side animation, and What If Anakin Skywalker Was Trained by the Force. Please consider becoming a member of the channel to help us out immensely, to see video ideas and thumbnails before everyone else. Please like the video and comment. I love replying to you all, and may the Force be with you.